In regards to Call of Duty and its skill gap, the most shocking yet fundamental truth is that random brings equilibrium. If you have two players that do combat against one another, the player with the higher skill level will overcome the player with the lower skill level. This is a basic truth. If the gap between the skill of each of these players is significant enough, say because one player has been practicing the art of COD since COD 4 and the other player only started on Black Ops 2, add to this that the skilled player simply was born with a brain better equipped with the analytical abilities and reflexes that make for a strong COD player simply because of genetics and the cold hard truth that some people are born better at some things. Well, in that case, the skilled player will overcome the less skilled player nearly every single time. And this is what scares the monolithic corporate overlords at Activision and their various prison bitch developers more than anything. Because even 90%, even 80% is too high a number. Because for every kill, there must be a death. You cannot get a kill without somebody else taking a death. And so for every 2 KD player at the top of the food chain, say with 1,000 kills and 500 deaths, there has to be a .50 KD player somewhere at the bottom of the food chain with 500 kills and 1,000 deaths. It is simple mathematical law. Call of Duty is a franchise that has accomplished its stunning success in excess with an incredibly effective strategy of making as many players as possible feel like badass motherfuckers, making them feel from the moment they start playing the game that this is something they are really good at. The better they are doing, the more fun they are having, and of course that fun is amplified intensely by success because human beings are systems of rewards and incentives. When you accomplish something, when you do well at something, whether it's an A on your report card or a kiss or fixing the printer at work, from the monumental to the most benign of things, your brain triggers a release of the chemical dopamine within your brain. And as that chemical flows through your pleasure systems, you acquire what is commonly described as a feeling of accomplishment, of goodness, of self-worth, of self-validation. And this of course applies to Call of Duty, especially Call of Duty. Every kill is dope. Every kill streak is a larger dose of dope, and the developers designed these things with your neurochemical balances in mind specifically. But of course, if such an essential part of COD's strategy is having each player, and new players especially, to do well and feeling good at the game when they do well, how can they possibly provide that satisfaction to everyone at the same time? Because for every kill there must be a death. They can't, but the truth is they don't have to, because their business model is in reality eerily similar to that of Big Tobacco. Their goal is to give you one big match, one match where you were the absolute and obvious dominant force in the match. A match where the amount of success you have generated, one match where you were the absolute and obvious dominant star. A match where the amount of success you had generated a massive dopamine release within the rewards and incentive circuits of your brain. The same dopamine release you get when you earn an achievement or a trophy, but better and bigger. Because dopamine is a drug that our biology, that our evolution has specifically designed in the hopes that we will chase it, that we will work for more of it, that we will do more and do better in our lives, and that is natural and completely healthy to an extent. But the problem is, it can be artificially manipulated to the detriment of the individual, and that is what COD seeks to do. The reason you may have often heard drugs of any kind referred to as dope is because that is really what they translate to in our brains, is a release of dopamine, and one of the most consequential negative effects of drugs is demotivation, the sapping of ambition, because when you can artificially inflate your dope to an extreme amount simply by acquiring a substance, you suddenly have a lot less incentive to get that high from the traditional hunter-gatherer forms of success, such as good grades or a promotion at work. The reason people overdose on heroin so often is because they are chasing the original high they got the first time they tried it. If you've ever heard of the phrase chasing the dragon, that's where that comes from. And the problem is it becomes basically impossible to get that same high as the first time another time, simply because now that the brain has had it once, its dopamine receptors have adapted and the same amount just isn't as satisfying anymore. In Modern Warfare 2, my first tactical nuke was a huge adrenaline rush, and I jumped up and down with glee, but a few months later, after I'd gotten dozens if not 100 of them, a single nuke by itself was meaningless. I felt nothing. In fact, I would get irritated in matches where I didn't get one. Now, to be fair, Call of Duty and the dope that it provides is not equivalent to that of drugs. There are still higher levels of dope to be scored and feasted upon at your college graduation, or landing that management position at the Taco Bell you've been working at for the last 10 years on minimum wage because you graduated college with an art history major. But, that being said, the underlying strategy that Call of Duty has developed is eerily similar to that of heroin. They want to give you that big game, that tactical nuke, the Moab, 50 and 5 chopper gunners and lodestars, because that one big game will provide you such a succulent amount of dope that you will chase that high with the memory of that match in the back of your mind for some time to come. I'm sure you all remember that big game. We all have at least one or several. I remember I was on MW2 sub base once, and I was close to a nuke, and I got out of my chopper gunner. I was out of ammo! And I explained my conundrum to my best friend Tommy, and he's like, I have an idea. So I'm hiding out in this stairwell, and he comes in and he cooks a frag and he kills himself. He lets me pick up his ACR, red dot sight, motherfucker. Now I wasn't expecting that at all, so I burst out laughing. I use it to drop 2 more kills. I get the nuke. I'm still fucking laughing hard from Tommy's suicide, and I'm extra fucking high off the second nuke I ever got. It was so much fun. We were ecstatic. It got me fucking high. And so I chased that high. And there are other ones too. 89 and 4 on Nuketown, with 2 gunships and 2 chopper gunners and an enemy team of fucktards who didn't know how to back out. A KSG Moab in MW3, the 55 and 0 near double nuclear flawless on Black Ops 2. The matches that keep you chasing, that string you along just long enough to get another one before you give up. And that way, you never give up. And what works beautifully in their favor is that the newer a player is, the lower their standards will be for what qualifies as one of these big games that give them that big rush. 25 and 5 with a lone chopper gunner is probably more than enough to satisfy someone who started playing last week. But of course, these matches are few and far between, and in the intervening time, there is lag and frustration, and just as the attic is filled with fury when he can't round up enough pennies for another dose, so too are we furious when inconsistent and seemingly broken hit detection and lag compensation systems cheat us out of the victories that are rightfully ours by way of skill. But these periods of pursuit are incredibly important to the string pullers behind COD, because while we are chasing that high, other players are able to get theirs, so that the trap and the cycle may be all-encompassing. And the only way to consistently provide even one incredible match to weaker or new players is to aggressively cheat stronger players. Because implementing in-game mechanisms which reduce the skill gap to its lowest possible point is, by itself, not an effective enough strategy to prevent the strong from bulldozing the weak consistently, because at the end of the day, there are some areas of the skill gap that simply cannot be overcome. I want to use this clip appearing on your screen right now as an example. This is basically a textbook example of a gunfight that I should have won, but that I lost because I was lagging about a full second behind. Now, if you'll watch the replay, you'll notice my aim is pretty on point and pretty quick, as it should be after the amount of time I've put into COD and other shooters over the last 6 years. And I'm certainly not trying to disparage or belittle or insult this other player who beat me. There are more important things in life than being good at Call of Duty, and maybe this was just a one-time fluke for him. Maybe it was just one of those situations where he's like scratching his balls with one hand, and then he sees me and he's like, oh shit, and fumbling with the controller or whatever. We've all been there. But the result, whatever the scenario may be, the result is that this guy's aim was terrible. He ADSs in the wrong spot, he begins firing before his reticle is over me, and this costs him about an extra half second, which in a fair gunfight will get you killed almost every single time. Especially against experienced players like myself and about 20 million other people. Because keep in mind, every COD for the last 6 years has sold roughly 20 million copies a game, and I think it's safe to say that a lot of those copies were simply sold to the same millions of people over and over again. And the end result of that is that if I'm a new player picking up COD for the first time, the vast majority of the players I might potentially run into have already been practicing this game for the last 5 years. After all that time, those players are going to be very talented in the areas of skill that are hard for the developers to compensate for. Things like aim and reaction time, reflexes and critical thought. It's hard to remove the skill gap in those areas simply because they are so basic. And even if the clip that I demonstrated to you of that guy's poor aim was a one-time thing for him, there are still lots of players whose aim is that flawed every single time. There are lots of players whose reaction time is hopeless, whose reflexes are hopeless, whose critical thought process about where to go and how to get there is hopeless. And that's not to say that they're bad players or bad people. We might have all been that bad at one point or another. But lots of players, especially new players, struggle with aiming, with managing recoil. If you search how to aim in Call of Duty Ghosts, you'll see a bunch of videos with very high amounts of views, sometimes coming from channels with under 1,000 subs. It's one of those special searches like how to fix lag that can get tens of thousands of views even for a channel with under 100 subs. And when a search is that popular, it's because the struggle is real, whether it's lag or aim, or in this case both. And any new players and all the not so good players are going to have a very difficult time getting their big match or feeling like they are good at the game, which again is what COD strives to imbue you with because that's what makes people enjoy the game so much, when they are struggling with basic things like aiming and are up against a community of COD players that all have 5 years of practice. If you've been playing since MW2, your aim is probably pretty spot on at this point, as is your reaction time and whatever else. After that amount of time, I'm sure the controls of the game are ingrained into your muscle memory to an extent as they are mine. And so aiming is one of those areas that provides a wide and meaningful skill gap and which is immune to the developers. All they could really do is implement bullet magnetism like you see in Halo, but I think that only works in Halo because nobody notices, but in Call of Duty people would notice. So hypothetically, if I'm playing on a working lag comp system or a LAN, and I bring my honed aim into the match against that guy with his very poor aim, I'm gonna beat him every time. And again, I don't mean to sound cocky, I don't think my aim is even that special. Again, I think I am one of 15 to 20 million other COD players who have just as high quality aiming abilities, because that's what happens after 5 years of practice. But if you're new to shooters or COD and you can't aim, that means you're going to have a very rough time in the beginning learning how to play the game against players who are very experienced. It'd be like joining a soccer league and you haven't played soccer before, but everyone else in the league has been playing for at least 5 years. You wouldn't do very well in the first match you played. There would be a natural learning period, as there typically is with all new things you try, where you have to get good at the game. But until then, you aren't going to feel like a badass, you're probably going to feel humbled if anything. But that doesn't sell games. Activision wants a 10-year-old who's picking up COD and shooters, hell, video games in general, for the first time in his life, to feel like a fucking badass. ASA motherfucking P. They want to get him hooked on the drug that is COD, because they know that all it takes is that one big game to keep you in their web for the rest of the year. It's like when cigarette companies are desperate just to get you to try one pack, because once you do, they know you'll be a lifelong customer. So the problem the developers have is that every year their current players get stronger aim and much better reflexes, and all the bullshit map design and new friendly class mechanisms isn't going to overcome the fact that if I have significantly better aim and reaction times, I'm going to beat you almost every time. Because when you have superior aim and or reaction times than the person you're going up against, you can get away with shit that you shouldn't get away with, like sprinting around the corner at a guy already ADS'd at the corner and getting the kill because the guy's reaction time sucked. Walking into a room, surviving an IED blast, you're weak and red as shit. All the enemy has to do is land one bullet and you're dead, but you fuck his ass up because while his aim failed and he ADS'd wide left like the guy in that clip, you managed to drop shot and land 3 bullets. Aim and reaction time are the most important skills in Call of Duty, simply because it is such a twitch shooter. The vast majority of gunfights are won and lost in less than a second, and that is also what makes the lag so frustrating, or in the eyes of the developers, so effective. Because when so many players at this point have such superior abilities in those areas, it makes it, statistically speaking, so much harder to get a new player or a bad player whose money is just as valuable as a good player's that big, good game. It is very difficult to make those players feel like badasses when they are losing fights they shouldn't lose simply because they are lacking in the two most fundamental and decisive skill trees of shooters, aiming and reaction time. So as a developer, how do you overcome the last bastion of skill gap in Call of Duty? You fucking cheat, that's how. In the dark hours of the night on a secret island during the height of the financial crisis, the head Call of Duty developers met with top Activision executives. The topic of discussion was how to milk more money out of Call of Duty. As a team-building exercise, they began an aggressive circle jerk. They wanted to stimulate free-flowing and creative thought, and so they did, for upon ejaculation, David Vonderhaar rose from his seat, and dick in his hand, he let out an evil laugh. Let's introduce a little anarchy, he says. Introducing random into a competition devalues skill. There is a direct ratio. The higher the level of randomness, the less impact skill itself will have on the outcome of a match. So let's say that Call of Duty is a game of basketball. For the sake of simplicity, it's a 1v1 and it's not a real game. They each take 10 shots and whoever scored the most baskets out of their 10 shots at the end wins. One of the players is a high school senior who has been playing basketball for 5 years. The other is a 12-year-old playing the game for the first time. They play a game. The experienced high school senior wins handily, 10 baskets to 4. The 12-year-old player who just got his butt kicked feels humbled, or depending on the scenario, humiliated. Regardless, that 12-year-old doesn't want to play another game of basketball against that senior because he realizes he cannot win, and he takes no joy or satisfaction in losing. There's no reason for him to keep playing. He walks away from the basketball court. He puts Call of Duty back on the shelf. Gives it back to his friend. Doesn't play long enough to buy the DLC, doesn't even get the game next year. Now, for the sake of hypothetically comparing basketball to Call of Duty, let's say the basketball court has an owner who charges admission fees. His name is Dick, but his friends call him Activision. Now, Dick wants the 12-year-old to keep coming back and playing basketball. The high school senior is about to move on to college in a different city. He's going to have to get a job and a girlfriend. He's not going to have as much free time or money to dedicate to basketball. But the 12-year-old will have plenty of free time to play and the entirety of his parents' wallets to dedicate to basketball over the course of the next 6 years. That's a lot of business walking out the door. So to give the 12-year-old a chance to win so that he might be encouraged to keep coming back, the court owner implements a new rule, one that introduces random into the equation. Every time you score a basket, you have to flip a coin to see if it counts. Now, from a purely mathematical standpoint, the high school senior will only get points for 5 of his 10 baskets, while the 12-year-old will only earn 2 points for his 4 baskets. If in traditional competition throughout human history the end score serves as a measurement of skill, then the true skill gap between these two players is 6 points. But after being put through the catalyst of random, that is the coin toss representing lag in Call of Duty, the perceived skill gap, the one that is ultimately measured, is only 3 points. It is significantly lowered from the true skill gap. The skilled player always has significantly more to lose to an act of randomness than the unskilled player. So 5-2 isn't as devastating a loss to the 12-year-old. He says to himself, hey, I've only been playing this game for a day, and I'm already almost as good as this high school senior with 5 years under his belt. I must be a fucking badass. He doesn't feel super ecstatic, he still lost, but he doesn't feel so discouraged that he stops playing. He's optimistic enough to try another match. Now, the first match experienced the exact effects of a 50-50 chance variable coin toss. However, it's not going to go down that way every single time. Statistical outliers are rare, but they are also inevitable. So what if in the next match, the skilled player only lands 8 baskets while the unskilled player still manages to land 4? And they experience a statistical outlier in that during the coin flip, 5 of the skilled player's baskets don't count, while all 4 of the unskilled player's baskets do count. The score is 4-3, and suddenly the 12-year-old has beaten the high school senior. The 12-year-old is ecstatic. He cannot help but think himself a prodigy. He has never played this game before, but he's already this good. He's getting a dopamine rush. He feels motivated to continue playing. He's going to remember that game for some time to come. He's going to chase it. And even though he will lose to the high school senior every game for the rest of that day, the random coin toss will consistently skew the results, making him feel that he's closer to victory than he really is, and he knows that victory is possible. He's done it once before. It was so fun, he just needs to do it again. And statistically speaking, if he keeps taking cracks at it, a statistical outlier is inevitable. Meanwhile, Dick just earned a new customer. Now, if the statistical outlier trends in the opposite direction, and the high school senior lands 10 baskets and wins the coin toss on every single basket, it doesn't matter. He would have earned those points anyways. With random involved, the best that a high-skilled player can do is win the gunfights he would have won anyways. Or at worst, lose the gunfights he was supposed to win. Whereas that same involvement of random can only cause the unskilled player at worst to lose the same gunfights he would have lost anyways, but at best cause him to win gunfights he never would have won. Because a skilled player has everything to lose and nothing to gain from random. Whereas the unskilled player has nothing to lose and everything to gain from that same random. And it's different in Call of Duty, because for every kill there must be a death. Not only does the skilled player get something positive, but the unskilled player gets something negative, the equivalent of the 12-year-old getting slapped in the face every time the senior scores a basket. Lag is the coin toss of Call of Duty. Every match you play, every time you turn the corner, you are flipping a coin to see who gets the extra half second in that particular match or gunfight. And similar to the basketball scenario, this doesn't mean the weak player is going to overcome the strong player. The high school senior still won the match, but it does mean the skilled player won't win by as much. If a 2.0 KD, 200 kills, and 100 deaths player is obstructed to the point that they are reduced to a 1.5 KD player, that means that somewhere at the bottom of the food chain, a 0.50 KD player is brought up to a 0.75 KD player. If a 2.0 KD player with 200 kills and 100 deaths is obstructed to the point that they are reduced to a 1.5 KD player with 150 kills to 100 deaths, that means that somewhere at the bottom of the food chain, a 0.50 KD player who would have had 100 kills to 200 deaths is brought up to a 0.75 KD player with 100 kills and 150 deaths. Because for every kill, there must be a death. When you reduce the enjoyment of the strong player, you are, by mathematical law, simultaneously increasing the enjoyment of the weaker player. And LAG accomplishes this masterfully because the strong player has everything to lose from random and nothing to gain, whereas the weak player has everything to gain and nothing to lose. Random brings these players closer to equilibrium. Not exact equilibrium, but close enough so that the 0.75 KD player has a much better chance of getting one of those statistical outlier big games to keep him chasing than he would as a 0.50 KD player. And it also means less pain and frustration and humiliation in the intervening times whilst he is chasing, which means he will chase longer. Meanwhile, the 1.50 KD player, who back on MW2 and World at War and COD 4 was able to do consistently well and drop big games every other game back when player skill was reliable and the only connection-related issue people even complained about was host advantage, is now basically in the same exact boat as the weak player, which is kind of the point. He still has a fine shot at getting a big game, and in the intervening time, he won't get shit on so hard that he quits chasing. Now eventually said player begins to notice the lag, begins to comprehend the illegitimacy of the game itself, in which scenario said player might be prompted to quit Call of Duty. And that is something that happens all the time, but Activision doesn't mind because the truth is, COD loses money on good players. And I made a whole video talking about this, but the simple truth is COD does not like high KD players because a high KD player is getting a bigger, more consistent high off the game and therefore plays the game more than most low KD players. And a 2 KD player with 50,000 kills has to be balanced out either by a 0.50 KD player with 50,000 deaths, which is rare if such a player exists at all. And even if they do, there's still plenty more 2 KD players with tens of thousands of kills who inevitably have to be balanced out by a disproportionate ratio of weak players. So for a 2 KD player with 50,000 kills, there usually has to be many 0.50 KD players with only a several thousand deaths each to balance out that first player. And all those players that have to carry the weight measured in deaths of the good player are going to be less likely to want to continue playing because the game isn't as much fun when you're dying twice for every kill you get. And what that means is that every lone single individual good player's $60 purchase inevitably hurts the prospects of many other players spending their $60 on the next game. And therefore Activision doesn't actually want said strong player around because his $60 is not worth more than the exponentially higher profits they would get from all of the potential customers they might be missing out on because said potential customers got shit on by the good player too hard and quit COD because the game is a house of cards whose only enjoyment comes from doing very well. And remember, every year there's always another batch of kids who have just come of an age and outgrown Wizard 101 and Dora the Explorer and asked their parents for an Xbox for Christmas. Every year there's a brand new lot of 7-year-olds who turn 8 and get that Xbox or that PlayStation. They are ready to replace you, and you being around hurts the chances of those other players becoming lifelong customers because you are an experienced fucking badass after 6 years of COD and you shit on 7-year-olds pretty consistently. Unless, of course, after 6 years of COD you still suck at the game, in which case Activision wants to keep you around forever because it's easier to force you into a state of equilibrium with the other weaker players. They want to keep their weak and shed their strong. In Activision's perfect world, everyone would have a 1.0 KD. It's a creepy communist mentality that we spent a generation trying to eradicate from the world, and yet here it remains creeping up in the recesses of Call of Duty. And the other thing to keep in mind is that I've been using the extremes of a 2.0 KD player to a 0.50 KD player. You know, equilibrium is much easier to accomplish between, say, a typical 1.50 KD player and a 0.80 KD player. The closer they are to 1.0, the easier it is to create equilibrium. And I believe, based on experience, a majority of COD players do fall somewhere between about 1.50 and at the bottom end 0.80. And so the lag strategy is that much more accomplishable and ultimately effective amongst those players who are a majority of players. The closer you are to 1.0, the easier it is to keep you within the boundaries of the system of random, running the wheel like a rat in a cage. And think of how easy it would be. They have ultimate control over the lag compensation system. They get to choose your packet rate. That is why the power of your connection is irrelevant, because at the other end, they are the ultimate arbiters in how quickly you send and receive information. All they have to do is intentionally fuck it up, and who would ever notice the difference? If somebody were to accuse them of it, they could just claim incompetence. That they are doing their best, they just can't fix this problem. And that's all it could possibly be if I'm wrong about this, is sheer incompetence. Developers who are genuinely unable to solve a problem that so many other games have been able to fix if they even had it in the first place, right? We saw Battlefield 4 had similar problems with its netcode and or lag compensation system. It was able to fix it, eventually. Most players still on Battlefield can attest to the fact that the hit detection is very smooth nowadays. They put the game on high performance, dedicated servers, they ran community testing, etc., etc. They did what they had to do to fix the problem. Battlefield was broken for 6 months. COD has been broken for nearly 6 years, since the release of Black Ops 1, which was the first game where Call of Duty's lag compensation was mysteriously tweaked in what was claimed to be an effort to remove host advantage from the game. I'm sure many of you that were around back then remember after that we started calling it host disadvantage. But here's the funny thing about that. Host advantage was a problem, but it really only applied to one person who would get a half-second advantage in the matches they pulled host. People complained about it, myself included, but not nearly as much nor as passionately as we complain about lag now. Because now it's just this fucked up system of chaos. The lag that has accompanied this supposed fix to the host advantage problem is 10 times as frustrating and game breaking as the original problem of host advantage ever was. And I know I'm not the only one that feels this way, because my 2 highest viewed videos are the ones with lag in the title, 30,000 a pop each from a channel that at the time of posting each had under 1,000 subs. And I'm not the only one who milked that cow. A lot of fucking people are confused about why they are lagging. Because no matter how much they buff their connection, better equipment, better service, whatever, they can't fix the fucking problem. You want to get some views on YouTube? Go post a video with Call of Duty and lag in the title. And yeah, it started in Black Ops 1, right after COD blew up with tens of millions of new players, and the Call of Duty games that came before that to this day are not as laggy as every COD release since. I challenge you, if you're still skeptical about my claims, and I understand this is a bold claim I'm making and I can't provide you definitive proof, but I challenge you, go get back on COD 4 or World at War or MW2. Play TDM in one of those games. The other playlists probably aren't populated enough for an accurate test. Play TDM in one of those games and then hop back on Ghost TDM and you decide which one has a worse lag problem. Tell me there isn't something fucking fishy about that. Call of Duty did not always have a lag problem until one day it did and it never went away. So maybe I'm wrong about all this, but if that's the case, that means the most profitable game in the business is hiring the weakest possible programmers. This billion-dollar company is unable to solve a basic problem that basically every other FPS multiplayer game, including several CODs themselves, have been able to solve over the last decade. Halo, Crysis, Battlefront, Homefront, Battlefields, going all the way back to the early 2000s on what is now considered low-quality tech. Every game has known about the lag compensation problem because it is pretty basic, and they've been able to fix it in a consistent way. Now granted, Battlefield has always had some launch issues, with the worst episode obviously taking place this year with Battlefield 4, but in the end, they always rein the problem in, even as they switch to entirely new engines every other year. While COD has had this major lag problem span several games on the same engine, and on an engine that at one point didn't have this lag problem, and on a very simple, basic, old engine that lots of studios have, developed and mastered. And with that in mind, if less people were less upset about host advantage as opposed to the lag now, why not just revert back to the old system instead of wasting money on dedicated servers that don't work anyways? And that's another big thing that confirms a lot more people are pissed off about the current lag than they ever were the host advantage, is that before Ghost came out, they had to announce for the first time ever in COD's history that it would be on dedicated servers, and that quelled the rage. They had to do it because people were fucking fed up with the lag in Black Ops 2. They weren't going to buy the game, so they came out and said, yeah, we're gonna have dedicated servers, and everybody bought the game only to find out that the dedicated servers were a fucking lie. A fucking lie. Here are some clips of host migrations on the Xbox One. Host migration shouldn't be possible on a dedicated server system. And obviously there have been host migrations on the 360 and PS3 since the beginning, but that's because they pulled some sneaky maneuvers with their wording when they announced dedicated servers for those consoles. And I made a whole video about that nonsense as well that you can check out if you're curious about just how deep the rabbit hole goes. It's time to swallow the red pill. Where are the connection bars next to our names on the scoreboard in Ghost? Did you notice that? You can't tell if you have a 4-bar or a 3-bar anymore. Why would they choose to hide that from you? A simple mechanic that allows you to check the strength of your connection on the game. This is something that every multiplayer game ever has included up until Ghost. Nor do they allow you to set your search restrictions to local only anymore either. Why take these things from us? Why nerf the players? Why limit the players' options? Could it be because kids were checking their connection, seeing a 4-bar, and concluding that the lag problem that is so obvious must not be on their end? Because they do want you to think it's on your end. They still have yet to officially acknowledge they even have a problem. The most they've ever done is provide us with step-by-step instructions on how to troubleshoot our own internet. Those fucking douchebags. But it's not our internet, because the lag is just as persistent regardless of how many bars you have up. And now you say, well, couldn't they intentionally tweak the bars to display 3 bars and thus convince we the people that it must be on our end? But that wouldn't work, because then everyone would be asking, why do I always 3-bar on COD and not other games? Because again, other games don't have this fucking problem. And that's exactly the question they don't want you asking. So they opted to remove the shit altogether. Always remember that the most powerful tool you have in confronting the corruption of entities more powerful than yourself is to ask the uncomfortable questions in front of the masses. Their PR is a house of cards in the same fashion as their game itself, and it's time we began to ask the questions that have yet to be answered. How come the dedicated servers don't fucking work? How come COD is unable to solve this problem when games half as profitable fix it with ease? How come the older Call of Duties didn't have this problem? And why do you still refuse to officially acknowledge this problem even exists? This game was founded on the principles of casual joy, a safe haven for the wage slave and oppressed student. It is time we the people rise up and take back what is rightfully ours, a just and legitimate Call of Duty experience. And all we have to do is ask the tough questions in the public square where everybody can hear. Make lag an issue this year. The Call of Duty community is the most volatile, indiscriminate, and hostile force on the internet. It is time to unleash that fury with true purpose. Once and for all, let us drive out the usurpers who, in the name of making their fat-ass wallets even fatter, ruthlessly exploit our hobby, our escape, our one kingdom in a world that does not understand or appreciate us. A world that is otherwise barren as it is raped by greed. And here and now, gaming is the last bastion of creativity, free from the chains of corruption. It is a beauty worth fighting for, a glory worth dying for. Hashtag Stop COD Lag. If you support the cause, please remember to rate the video, and may the force be with us all. Godspeed, gentlemen. This is Batman, signing out.